Hi. On Monday, June 8th, we put out a statement and felt like it was a pretty appropriate and thorough acknowledgement of our position as a company, as a somatic education brand, of how we relate to everything going on right now, and certainly with regard to COVID-19, and generally, more specifically in this country. And we want to build on that. This is essentially part 2 of that video. There are a couple components we'll get into here in the beginning, and then there's one really specific piece which is a continuation from the first video. If you haven't watched the first video, it's certainly going to be helpful if you want to understand where we're coming from. I'm not going to repeat much from that one, at least try not to. And I hope that this is informative and helpful. That's the intention, to be informative. First, if you're seeing this in our newsletter on Saturday, June 27th, then yesterday, you know, the state or the county went green, so to speak. We're now officially in the green zone, I believe they call it. For Koru, what we have chosen is to stay basically closed, and we're only going to be open for private one-on-one sessions. We'll have potentially a handful of practitioners using the space and providing their services, but it will only be one-on-one practitioners, and there won't be anything more than that right now. And of course, in short, we think this is the responsible way to be a business right now, the responsible thing to do, to keep it this way. We recognize that not everybody can do that, or doesn't feel like it's possible for them, but at this point, that's what we're gonna do. Second thing is, we want to reiterate the essence of the message from our first video about the election. If you're not aware, there's a big election coming up in November. We hear good things are coming. Presidential election, to say the least. We're going to be voting. We feel it's important to be engaged with regard to this election as a business. And here's what we want to say. There are two things. The candidate, so to speak, who best embodies an integrative and inclusive attitude about certainly all the citizens of this country, but ideally the world, that's the candidate we will be supporting. Not going to get more specific than that in this one. You can go back to the other video if you'd like. But I will repeat from the other video that no matter who wins this election, there is no kidding ourselves at this point that we have a lot of grassroots, local work to do. And whoever, so to speak, is leading us, it's not going to make a difference in that regard. And the very idea that the president, so to speak, whoever's in charge in that way, is our savior, is going to make or break anything for us, that is an extremely limiting and obviously destructive idea, and we need to move on from that. And part of how we're going to have to move on from that is to recognize that it's going to come down to us to make more choices for ourselves, no matter what. Okay, again, we will be voting in a specific direction, and it will primarily be about inclusivity and integration. So on that note, the really important piece of this video, of course, has to do with where we are as a brand in relationship to, the broader cultural conversation taking place. We have a lot to say in this regard, and we want to be clear about our position. And we have so much to learn. There's so much to learn. Just right off the bat, gonna make this very clear. There is no denying that this country, and yes, perhaps to a larger extent, the civilization, has been created with incredible bias and support towards white, straight men, one of whom you're looking at. So white, straight men, no doubt about it, have had less limitations, and for sure the norm has been to support our success and our potential. To think otherwise, I suspect you're not watching this video if you think otherwise, so we won't waste our time getting too into that. But to think otherwise is obviously absurd. Okay, and if you're not sure about that, please explore something like 13th, or read White Fragility, so on and so forth. There's so much, and we'll provide more resources, and we have provided them in our newsletter, but please explore. And just take into consideration this one very simple fact. How many of you, including myself, I knew about Tulsa a week or two ago? I only learned about it last fall. We didn't know about it for good reason. Okay? The history books, the stories that we've been told have been from the perspective of, as the saying goes, history is written by those who win, so to speak. White, straight men have obviously been the predominant power holders, the people with most power. Okay? And of course, there is something that's come out of that's good. Of course, it's not all bad, and that's part of what we need to get into here in this last section. But there's no denying that that's part of the story that got us here. And with that, the story. I'm going to speak as myself, but again, we're talking as Koru. We've all gone over this together here. I really believe this is an opportunity for at least this country that is on par with the American Revolution. I wasn't around in 1776, but it seems like the potential is pretty ripe right now for extraordinary growth. I feel so excited. I feel so excited because that is this seems like an unparalleled opportunity. And the part that I really, last night as I was imagining how to get this out, really sunk in for me is, I need to be honest, I need to be human. I am also concerned. There's a powerful foundational myth which has been the driving narrative, or been the driving component for our civilization, clearly from as far back as I'm aware of. And it is the idea or the myth that separation is absolute. Separation is not absolute. The fly that was on my hand is, in some respects, me. It's obviously also just a fly. But the idea that that's complete, that there's absolute separation, is tragically destructive idea. And it is the very idea which is reinforcing the systems, as we call them, of unnecessary suffering and purposeless violence, excessive violence. I'm concerned that we won't get what we need right now, which is to see that piece of the puzzle is in the way. That as we call it, the system, it is designed for this. It is, I'm not suggesting a conspiracy theory, but there is an aspect of it which inherently reinforces itself by with reactivity, with fighting, with otherness, with seeing other, with seeing separation, with seeing us as not part of the same whole. As long as we think of separation in these absolute ways, and we think of ourselves as not inherently an interdependent and interconnected whole, as long as we think that way, we're going to reinforce this very system, so to speak, which it seems like we are now at a place where we can not change, but let go of. We can let go of it. It is rotten to the core. The soil is full of all kinds of filth. And if we don't see what's really at the heart of the matter here, which is in our thinking, it is the way we think of ourselves and each other and the world as actually separate and not an inherent whole of which we are parts, unique individuals and parts. If we don't change our thinking about that and change the very way that we engage with each other in that, with that thinking, and the world at large with that thinking, we're going to reinforce the very violence and suffering that we clearly wish to be done with. We could be done with it. And this video is called, very specifically, the play paradigm, because the more that we really explore this here at Koru, and we do that primarily with what we call somatic education, the further and further that we go into that, the more and more we are convinced that the primary skill to move us forward, which I'm laughing because I can't help but imagine how absurd it might sound, but I mean it wholeheartedly. The primary skill that we are forgetting and lacking is the ability to play. Play, and I don't mean like a child. I'm not suggesting that we need to become children again. It's a matter of being with life, the process of living and life itself, as a constant, never-ending opportunity or call to grow and explore and discover. We relate to life, there's actually a term for it, it's called fixed ideation syndrome. We relate to life as if it's a means to an end, and we don't even know it. And we strive for an ending. Sometimes it's called destination addiction. That's built into the system of separation. The idea that you can have power over, such that you can then control the circumstances, and enforce some kind of finite ending state. That's the very psychosis, if you will, the very problematic thinking that we need to just be done with, just let go of. And the way to do that, as far as I can tell, as far as we can tell, is to remember how to play. Okay, this is a hell of a lot longer than I expected, but I've kept it pretty... I allowed myself to improvise quite a bit. Anyway, here's the key. Here's the question. First off, if any of this even slightly intrigued you, the possibility that there's a foundational myth which is in the way, how are you going to relate to that moving forward? How are you going to relate to that from this point on? Are you going to continue to believe in separation as an absolute aspect of reality? Or are you going to start to explore how everything is interconnected and interdependent, including you, including your body. I believe we are at a major fork in the road where we can choose to see ourselves as an obviously unique and incredibly powerful, dare I say divine, aspect of all of existence in life, but still an aspect of it. Or we're going to continue to see ourselves as separate from, yes, nature, from all of existence, if you will, and therefore from each other, and therefore from something within ourselves. That path we know, that's the path we've been on. It's destructive. It's filled with this purposeless violence and this unnecessary suffering. This other path is a completely different paradigm. I think we are at a time where we need to make a choice. And it is not obvious how to move forward because we're often thinking in this old way, this way that we need to let go of. We need to learn how to think in this new way. And for the last time, I know I've repeated this basically now 4 times. It seems like, as far as we can tell, that comes down to remembering how to play. All right, before this is 20 minutes long, let's pause there and thank you. Thanks for listening, and let's talk about this more. I hope you engage with us. I hope we hear from you. Let us know what you think. Let's discuss this. Okay, I don't really know who our audience is at this particular point because so much is changing, but I suspect that if you're listening, you are someone who is really ready for a paradigm shift. You're someone who sees a need to reform the way that we are going about creating a new world. You see that we need to go about doing it in a new way. Well, that's what we're going to be focusing on. That's what we focus on, and we're going to continue to do that in some very new and exciting ways, some of which you'll hear about very soon. I'm going to leave it at that, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate your willingness and desire to consider the need to learn how to be human differently. I think we can, and I'm excited. I'm excited. I think we can do it. All right. I'm going to turn it off now.